All right, let's go straight to the global space. Right now it's a brand new week, and we're having John McQuarrie with the details of what's playing out with the global economy. Good to have you, Ini.
Thanks, Laddie. Good morning.
Good morning.
I heard you at the closing moments with your guests talking about getting advice from AI.
Yeah. Ini, it works. I tried it one time. Yeah. I put in the earnings of a company into AI, and I said, tell me about these. Is it bullish or bearish? Tell me the bullish parts, tell me the bearish parts, and if it will help the stock price rise. And it gave me some credible information.
So what happens to the good old follow the news, the rumors?
Oh yes, that's still there. You need to follow the, you need to follow the fundamentals.
Even when you ask AI, you still have to take responsibility.
Oh yeah,
I hope you know.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Don't let AI lose you money.
All right, good morning, everyone. We start off the global news with what to expect this week. And we can see it's going to be a very busy week around the world. Just I didn't see Nigeria there. We don't expect any data from Nigeria. But today, Monday, we're expecting from Singapore, their FX reserve should be out. In Indonesia, their consumer confidence data is what we're expecting. On Tuesday, that's tomorrow, from Japan, the M2 money stock year-on-year is expected. In Norway, core inflation month-on-month. Sweden will show their household consumption year-on-year. Brazil, consumption price index for month-on-month. On Wednesday, we head to South Africa. Business confidence data is expected. Non-farm payrolls from the United States, that's always sticking out and determines a whole lot of sentiment. Also from the United States, unemployment rate is expected. In China, CPI, inflation, with all that has been happening, CPI and PPI for the producers. In South Korea, the unemployment rate is expected on Wednesday. It's very busy in Asia. There are more expectations from Asia on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, we go to the United Kingdom. Production, manufacturing production, month-on-month is expected, and their trade balance as well. And then from the United States, there's a Federal Reserve balance sheet that should be shared on Thursday. And finally, for the week, we head back to Asia, where Japan foreign investment in Japanese stocks start to be shared, as well as in China, where house prices for year-on-year would be shared on that day. Away from expectations now, a little bit of what happened on Friday. We know on Friday the biggest news globally was the talks between the United States and Iran that was happening in Oman. Well, updates on that is that Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas has said that they've ruled out Tehran ever giving up uranium enrichment in its negotiations with Washington, insisting that it will not be intimidated by the threat of war by the United States. And he told a forum in Tehran that Tehran had little trust in Washington, sounds like trouble, and even doubted that the U.S. side was taking renewed negotiations seriously. And is asking, why should we insist on so much on enrichment and refuse to give it up, even if a war is imposed on them, that's Iran, because no one has the right to dictate their behavior. That's according to the minister there from Iran. So it sounds like a lot of trouble, and I'm sure by now, especially investors in the safe haven, that's the metals and oil, we will see a lot of reactions. I hope to bring you those numbers at intraday for during Business Incorporated. I'm sure this statement would have been factored in by then, and we're going to see movement in investors' sentiment. And then in China, low interest rate environment is driving a surge in interbank borrowing as financial institutions take advantage of cheap funding to buy bonds. The daily volume of overnight repurchase contracts rose to a record 8.2 trillion yuan, that's about $1.2 trillion, according to data from China Foreign Exchange Trade System. Financial institutions are increasingly using this tool to fund leveraged bond purchases. And now let's have a conversation on the future of emerging economies, rare earth minerals here on the continent, and of course the issue that, or the topic that the future population is in Africa. Nigeria captured. Having a conversation now with John Defterios. You would know him more from CNN. He's a former emerging market editor and anchor at CNN. but is also Senior Fellow, Center for Energy and Materials at the World Economic Forum, and joins us here. Thank you so much, Mr. Defterios. Now, you recently moderated discussions with African heads of states on investments at the World Government Summit. What you heard, what's the strongest case that Africa can be making at this time?
From what you heard, Africa has what the world needs right now. So if you roll back to the COVID-19 pandemic and the Russia-Ukraine conflict, the kind of global narrative is you don't need to invest in new oil and gas projects or new mining projects. That has completely changed for two reasons. We have the AI rollout around the world, and energy is needed, and Africa has it. Oil and gas and the renewable energy projects that are being distributed around the world. But most importantly, I think this is the greatest opportunity for Africa now. It sits on the strategic minerals that is needed for the development of AI. So number one, the chips that you need, but the power generation that's needed. And if you think about the energy transition, it is the wind turbines, the solar PV panels, battery storage. We're talking about scale of a 30 to 40% increase in energy demand over the next decade. So it's vitally important that the natural resources are packaged correctly for global investors. And that is why I think we've talked about the Africa decade for the last 3 decades, and I think it was all a bit premature. This next decade, I would in fact say all the way up until 2040, is the window that Africa needs to hit, if I can use the American term, a home run here. It needs to package what they have on a very sophisticated landscape here for global investors. But there's a need for what Africa has, and it's a great growth opportunity if we can get this next 14 to 15 years correct.
Who was the most fixable obstacle that has been keeping capital away from the continent?
In 2025, according to UNCTAD, with its preliminary report, these aren't finalized just yet, but we're looking at global FDI of $1.5 trillion last year around the world. That was a recovery off of a downturn in 2024 because of a lot of uncertainty. But Africa only garnered about $60 billion of that. In fact, it was just under that number. That is appalling by every measure. And Africa traditionally kind of averages between 3 to 4% of global FDI. But going back to the points I was raising before, there's a need for what Africa has. Now, what is needed is clearly, in this case, a push for greater reforms in the major economies of Africa.
And then when you look at a country like Nigeria, Ghana, what do you think they should be doing now to decongest some of those clogged areas for especially global investors?
A new era for Africa. We recognize there is global demand for the resources that we have right now. It's our job to show you the transparency that we're capable of. These are the reforms that are already in place. It's not like we're coming from a standstill position, but these are the reforms we can promise over the next 10 to 15 years to give you a great deal of trust in what we have to offer. And I don't think it's a joke right now. I actually think if you look at the combined GDP that I was talking about, that is almost a joke. Africa is capable of a lot more, and with the leadership that I see right now, and I see some of the turbulence that takes place, I see some of the challenges with the currency strains. For example, in Ghana, they had a huge inflation problem. Their currency was under pressure. Very wisely, the government used the gold reserves to guarantee the currency, put that into the central bank to give stability. These are the sort of actions that investors are looking for, and I was pleasantly surprised in front of this audience of global investors, and the UAE is the largest investor in Africa. They were speaking to a group that supports Africa. They said all the right things. This is in our hands to push through the reforms now and have a continuity of those reforms to give you comfort to come into a phenomenal growth opportunity. And as the former head of the African Development Bank, who is chairing the Global Africa Investment Summit, he said, this is our job right now to follow a roadmap of sound economic policies and sound reforms. But very importantly, part of it's marketing. You have sovereign-backed assets in Africa. they're attractive if they're backed by the state, and you have, the regional banks and the local banks there as partners to the global investors. There's no reason it doesn't work. It sounds, almost, I'm like a prophet here saying this should happen, it will happen. But the reality is, if there's a window in time when Africa should be able to have continuous growth looking at the global demand for artificial intelligence and materials needed for the energy transition, it is right.
Thank you so much, John Defterio, Senior Advisor at APCO and former Emerging Markets Editor and Anchor at CNN, talking to us about what Africa should be doing now, especially as an emerging economy, to capture more global capital to the continent. And that's it on Global News for this time. Thank you for watching.